Sam Miller, a quiet janitor and former Marine, unnoticed by most, secretly leaves food for Eli Thompson, a lonely boy at Oakridge Elementary. Their unspoken bond grows through small gestures: a sandwich, a cookie, a wave. Then a note from Eli reveals his father was a Marine, stirring Sam's memories. One morning, Marines arrive, saluting Sam for his care of Eli, their fallen comrade's son. The school is stunned, and Sam's hidden heroism surfaces. But why did the Marines honor a janitor? What deeper connection binds Sam and Eli? The truth will unravel, reshaping their small town forever. Inspired by Sam and Eli's story? Share your own tales of quiet kindness in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this video to spread their legacy. Your support fuels our channel to bring more heartfelt stories. Join us in celebrating the power of small acts that change lives. The schoolyard buzzed with the usual chaos of recess, a cacophony of laughter and shouts bouncing off the brick walls of Oakridge Elementary. A sharp voice cut through the noise, laced with equal parts mockery and intrigue. "Hey, teacher, look, that janitor's leaving food for the weird kid again." Heads turned, eyes darting toward the stone bench where Sam Miller, the school's aging janitor, stood in his faded gray coveralls. His weathered hands placed a neatly wrapped sandwich beside a bottle of water, as they had every day for months. Sam didn't acknowledge the stares or the snickers. He offered only a faint, knowing smile, then turned back to his mop cart, its wheels squeaking faintly as he shuffled away. To the kids, it was just another odd ritual in a world full of them. To Sam, it was something deeper, a quiet act of duty, born from a life shaped by sacrifice and survival. But 1 week later, the ordinary rhythm of Oakridge Elementary shattered, replaced by a moment that would etch itself into the memory of every student, teacher, and staff member present. Through the school's front gates marched a formation of United States Marines, their boots striking the pavement in perfect unison, their dress blues glinting under the Tennessee sun. The entire school fell silent, frozen in awe as the Marines halted, turned as one, and raised a crisp salute. Not to the principal, not to a visiting dignitary, but to Sam Miller, the unassuming janitor, who stood beside his cart, his gray-blue eyes wide with a flicker of surprise and something deeper. And in that moment, the question on everyone's mind burned brighter than ever. Why would the United States Marine Corps honor a man like Sam, a janitor who seemed to fade into the background of their small, rural town? Sam Miller at 69 was the kind of man who you could pass a dozen times in a day and never truly see. And that suited him just fine. His wiry frame, stooped shoulders, and hands etched with the scars of decades of labor told a story of a life spent working, enduring, and carrying on. His face, lined and weathered like old leather, held a quiet dignity, but it was his eyes, soft gray blue, sharp beneath the brim of a battered ball cap, that hinted at the depths most people overlooked. Those eyes had seen things others could only imagine. The dense jungles of war zones, suffocating jungles of the war zones, the narrow roads rigged with danger, the faces of men and women who relied on him to get them through. Sam had been a Marine transport specialist during some of the American military's most perilous years in the war, guiding convoys through chaos, delivering supplies to outposts under fire, and evacuating stranded civilians and Marines stranded when hope seemed lost. Back then, Sam was known for his calm under pressure, his stubborn refusal to abandon anyone, and his uncanny knack for finding ability to find a way forward. When others faltered, the world seemed to conspire against it. In the heat of those moments, Sam had felt alive, tethered to a purpose larger than himself. Yet the brittle memories of those years lingered, a quiet, heavy ache he carried in his chest, tempered by the peace he'd found in letting go of stories that no longer needed telling. Those stories fade. When Sam returned to civilian life in Oakridge, Tennessee, he did so without fanfare. He didn't need the fanfare. He didn't join veterans groups, didn't pin his medals, didn't regale to anyone with tales of his service. The medals, in fact, sat in a dusty small wooden box in the back of his closet, gathering dust alongside memories he rarely touched revisited. Instead, he sought work that kept his hands moving busy and his mind steady. Mechanic, truck driver, handyman, jobs that let him slip through the world unnoticed. When his knees began to creak and his back protested the years of heavy lifting loads, he took the janitor's job at the Oakridge Elementary. It was simple, steady work, and in the hum of school bells, the chatter of students, and the rhythm of his daily chores, Sam found a kind of solace, a peace he hadn't expected. He The school became his sanctuary, a place where he could serve in his own quiet way, unnoticed but necessary. To the staff, Sam was a fixture, reliable as the sunrise. He was the first to arrive, unlocking doors dawn, sweeping the walkways, sweeping away leaves, and salting the sidewalks when frost coated the ground. When the heat sputtered or failed or pipes froze, Sam was the one they called, and he always showed answered. Tools in hand, never failed to answer, his face set with steady, the resolved same quiet determination that had once guided him through war zones. He fixed dripping, leaky faucets, unjammed stubborn lockers, and replaced flickering bulbs with quiet efficiency without fanfare, moving through his work tasks with the precision efficiency of a man who'd spent years, a lifetime, solving problems under fire. To the kids, he was the old janitor man in the gray coverall, pushing his mop cart, offering a nod or a quick, faint smile as they passed. His voice was soft, his words sparse. "Morning, kiddo," or a quick wink when a kid shyly waved. He was the one who pressed a Band-Aid onto a scraped knee, steadied a teetering science project, or slipped a forgotten pencil into a small hand with quiet grace. They didn't see, but to most adults, Sam was invisible, a figure whose presence was felt but rarely noticed, a shadow who moved with purpose, acknowledged. They didn't see the way his military past still burned and shaped him, the way his Marine code, duty, honor, duty, guided quiet duty, his unwavering vigilance, guided every step. Sam's heart, though worn, beat with a fierce, quiet loyalty to those around him. To him, Oakridge wasn't just a workplace. It was his unit, his mission. The principal, Mrs. Caldwell, was a leader he respected. Organized, fair, steady, and commander she, like the best officers he'd known. The teachers were the backbone, pouring their souls into a grindwork there that Sam saw as tougher, grueling than most folks realized gave credit for. And the kids, students, they were the heart, each one carrying their own dreams, fears, and struggles. Sam watched them with a soldier's care, noting the kid who sat alone at lunch, the backpack too light for school, the shoes too worn to last winter. Duty, for him to Sam, meant showing up. It meant staying late. It meant seeing the ones who fell through the cracks, like Eli Thompson. Eli was an enigma, a ghost at Oakridge. Small, for with his age, with dark hair that curtained his eyes and clothes that hung loosely on his thin frame. He drifted through the school like a shadow, silent, unnoticed. He spoke little, barely, answered with nods or shrugs, and kept to himself at recess, dodging the rough and tumble games of his peers. To others, he was the weird kid, a target for whispers, giggles, and sidelong glances. To teachers, Eli, he was a puzzle, a kid student who did in his work but offered nothing more. His silence a wall. They couldn't breach crack. But to Sam, Eli was something else, a soul in need, of quiet watching over. Sam noticed the empty lunch tray, the way Eli lingered by the bench, the tension in his shoulders when tense kids as approached others drew near. Sam didn't need to ask questions. He'd seen that kind of quiet before, in men who'd carried too much for too long. So without a word, Sam started leaving food. A sandwich, an apple, water, each a bottle of water, each day a small gesture that asked for nothing in return. He didn't linger to see if Eli took it. He didn't need to. Knowing it was enough to know the boy wouldn't go hungry was enough. To Sam, it wasn't charity. It was what you did for your own people. His Marine years had taught him survival wasn't just about dodging bullets or bombs. It was about the small things, a sharing a ration, patching a wound, lending a hand when someone faltered. Those lessons never faded, left him. In Eli, Sam saw a chance to live them again. He didn't know Eli's full story, didn't need to. He saw the hunger, the solitude, the weight the kid boy carried, and that was enough. Each sandwich was a vow, a promise. You're not alone. You're seen. And for Sam, that vow promise was as binding as any he'd ever made sworn. Sam Miller woke each morning in the pre-dawn stillness, his modest two-room apartment cloaked in quiet. The space was sparse, almost ascetic. A worn wooden chair, a small table scarred by years of use, a narrow bed draped in a faded quilt. Bare walls surrounded him, save for one black and white photograph, a frozen moment from his time as an American Marine, where young men stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes holding a mix of pride and unspoken burdens. Sam owned no car, nor did he desire one. Instead, he walked the empty streets of Oakridge each morning, a thermos of bitter coffee warming one hand, a dented lunchbox swinging in the other. His steps were measured, purposeful, as if each one tethered him to a calling larger than himself. By evening, he'd retreat to his sanctuary, where the hum of old radios he painstakingly repaired or the soft rustle of pages from secondhand paperbacks filled the silence. These rituals were his refuge, a bulwark against memories that lingered like shadows. At Oakridge Elementary, Sam was more than the man who swept floors or fixed broken desks. He was the school's quiet pulse, a steadfast presence who sanded down splintered playground equipment, cleared ice from walkways, and spotted hazards others missed. The children were his purpose, those vibrant, messy souls who left trails of glitter and laughter in their wake. For them, he worked late without complaint, ensuring a wobbly chair was safe or a storm-swept playground was clear. His humility ran so deep it was almost a fault, yet his steady presence grounded Oakridge in a way few acknowledged. Teachers moved on, students graduated, principals retired, but Sam endured, his small acts of care forming an unseen scaffold that kept the school whole. He sought no praise. The work itself was enough. But beneath his calm routine, a quiet unrest stirred. Sam had seen the toll of neglect, lives unraveled by apathy, promises shattered like glass, people lost in the gaps of a world too busy to care. Those lessons, etched into him during his Marine service, burned still. No one gets left behind, he'd vowed long ago, and that vow found new life in Eli Thompson. The boy, 9 years old and fragile as a sparrow, carried a sadness in his eyes that Sam knew too well. Eli was new to Oakridge, but his quiet demeanor spoke of a life spent fading into the background. In him, Sam saw a mission, unvoiced but urgent, as vital as any he'd carried in uniform. His life had been a series of these quiet promises, to notice, to protect, to ensure no one slipped away unseen. Eli Thompson had perfected the art of vanishing. At 9, he moved through Oakridge Elementary like a ghost, untouched by the chaos of shouting children and ringing bells. In a school where kids collided like marbles, Eli's stillness was a shield, honed by circumstances he couldn't control. Life had taught him early that invisibility was safer than standing out, a lesson born from the wreckage of his parents' divorce, a cataclysm that split his world, and the tremors that followed. Heated arguments echoing through thin walls, his mother's weary face, the constant uprooting from one town to the next. In 2 years, they drifted through 3 towns and 2 states, each move leaving behind a classroom of strangers and a house that never felt like home. Oakridge was just another stop, and Eli bore it with a quiet resignation, his shoulders hunched under the weight of it all. In the classroom, Eli staked out the back row near the window where he could gaze outside without being noticed. His brown hair fell into his eyes, a shield he rarely pushed aside, and his 2 large shirts draped loosely over his slight frame, hand-me-downs that marked him as different. His backpack, worn thin and fraying, was always half-zipped, with crumpled papers spilling out like fragments of a life he couldn't hold together. Lunch was a ritual of scarcity. While classmates unpacked sandwiches, fruit, and juice, Eli made do with a lone granola bar or a few crackers, stretching each bite as if it might be his last. His silence defined him more than his appearance. He didn't raise his hand, didn't join recess games, didn't speak unless prompted. Teachers fretted, jotting reminders to check in, to call home, to recommend counseling. But in the chaos of packed classrooms, those intentions faded, and Eli slipped through, a quiet boy lost in the din. Sam saw him from the start. That first week, he noticed Eli arriving early, perched on the low stone wall by the east playground, knees drawn tight, reading a tattered book or staring into the distance. His solitude was palpable, a weight Sam recognized. At lunch, Sam watched Eli linger by a bench, feigning interest in his shoelaces as others raced to the cafeteria. The boy's hunger wasn't just physical, though his thinness spoke of that too. It was a deeper yearning, the ache of being unseen in a world that rushed past. Sam knew that emptiness, had felt it in moments he buried deep. So, without ceremony, he began to watch over Eli, his mission taking shape in the small, steady acts that had always been his way. Every morning as the first light crept over the horizon, Sam Miller moved through the quiet grounds of Oakridge Elementary with the steady rhythm of a man who knew his purpose, even if he never spoke it aloud. His hands, rough from years of labor, pushed a mop cart or carried a toolbox, but his routine had grown to include something more, a small, deliberate act of care. On the stone bench near the east playground, he'd leave half a sandwich, carefully wrapped in wax paper, or an apple nestled in a napkin, sometimes a bottle of water or a single cookie, soft and homemade. He never lingered, never drew attention to his offerings. It was as natural to him as sweeping the walkways or checking the locks, a quiet gesture born of instinct rather than calculation. Eli Thompson, a boy of 10 with eyes that carried too much weight for his years, never asked about the food. He didn't need to. The first time he found the sandwich, his fingers hesitated, hovering over the wax paper as if it might vanish if he touched it. His heart thudded with a mix of curiosity and caution, his mind racing to understand why someone would leave this for him. He glanced around the empty school yard, his breath catching when he spotted Sam across the grass, pushing his cart with the same steady rhythm as always. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Sam gave the faintest nod, a gesture so subtle it might have been missed by anyone else. Eli's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, a flicker of warmth in a face that rarely showed it. He tucked the sandwich into his backpack, not with greed but with reverence, as if it were a treasure he wasn't sure he deserved. That moment marked the start of something unspoken, a fragile thread of trust weaving itself between them. Eli's life had taught him to expect little. His father, once a towering presence with a laugh that filled their small house, had faded like a photograph left too long in the sun. After the divorce, the weekend visits dwindled, each cancellation a fresh cut to Eli's heart. The birthday cards, once filled with his father's looping handwriting, stopped coming altogether. Eli didn't cry or rage. He simply learned to carry the absence quietly, like a stone in his pocket. His mother, Anna, was a force of love and determination, pouring herself into long shifts at the diner to keep them afloat. But her exhaustion was a heavy presence in their home, and Eli, ever perceptive, became a shadow in his own life, tiptoeing around her weariness. He packed his own lunches when the pantry allowed, and when it didn't, he made do with less, never complaining. He learned to navigate the world with a quiet resilience, folding his clothes with precision, catching the bus on time, blending into the background to avoid adding weight to his mother's load. But beneath his silence, Eli felt the ache of a world that seemed to shift beneath his feet, unpredictable and unsteady. The sandwiches, though, were different. They appeared with a reliability that felt almost miraculous to Eli. Each morning as he approached the stone bench, his heart lifted just a fraction, a spark of hope igniting in the gray haze of his routine. The food wasn't just sustenance. It was proof that someone saw him, that someone cared enough to notice the quiet boy who tried so hard to be invisible. Over weeks, the ritual grew, silent but steady, like a heartbeat. Eli's initial wariness faded, replaced by a quiet trust. He no longer glanced around nervously before taking the food. Instead, he'd reach for it with a calm certainty, his eyes softening as he tucked it away. The sandwiches, the apples, the occasional cookie, they were small anchors in a life that often felt adrift. For Sam, the act was simple at first, almost instinctual. He'd seen Eli's thin frame, the way his clothes hung a little too loosely, the way his eyes stayed fixed on the ground. Sam didn't know the full story, but he didn't need to. He'd lived long enough to recognize hunger, not just for food, but for something steady, something to hold on to. A former Marine, Sam carried his own scars, Memories of a life where loss and waiting had carved deep grooves into his heart. He'd known men who never came back, fathers who left behind children waiting for a knock that never came. So he left the food quietly, without fanfare, because that's what a man did when he saw a need. He didn't expect thanks, didn't expect anything at all. But as the weeks passed, he found himself looking forward to the ritual, to the moment when he'd catch Eli's eye across the yard, the boy's faint smile, a quiet acknowledgement that warmed something deep in Sam's chest. Winter settled over Oakridge Elementary, the air sharp with cold, the playground dusted with frost. The ritual held firm, a small constant in a world that could be cruelly unpredictable. Eli began to carry himself a little differently, his shoulders less hunched, his steps a little lighter. The food nourished more than his body. It fed a part of him that had been starving for kindness, for consistency. Sam, too, felt the weight of their quiet connection. Each morning as he placed the food on the bench, he thought of the boy's silent gratitude, the way Eli's eyes had begun to meet his with a flicker of trust. It was a small thing, but in Sam's solitary life, it was a light he hadn't realized he needed. Then, one frigid Tuesday morning, everything changed. Sam returned to his maintenance room after fixing a classroom heater, his hands still tingling from the cold. As he pushed open the door, he noticed a folded piece of paper just inside, slipped carefully under the threshold. The edges were worn, as if it had been carried in a pocket for days before being left. He picked it up, his calloused fingers brushing the neat but slightly shaky handwriting. Unfolding it, he read, "Thank you for the sandwiches. My dad was a Marine too. I don't know if he's alive anymore, but you remind me of him." Sam sank onto the edge of his stool, the note trembling in his hands. He read it again, then a third time, each word sinking deeper into the quiet of the maintenance room. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade, leaving only the weight of Eli's words. Sam's chest tightened, memories of his own past rising unbidden. Nights spent waiting for a father who never returned, the hollow ache of absence that never quite healed. He hadn't known Eli's story, not fully, but the note bridged a gap he hadn't realized was there. For the first time in years, something pierced the armor of solitude he'd built around himself, a crack letting in both pain and warmth. He sat there for a long time, the note cradled in his hands, his eyes tracing the boy's careful handwriting. Eli's words were more than gratitude. They were a confession, a quiet offering of trust that mirrored Sam's own silent gifts. In that moment, Sam understood that their ritual was more than food left on a bench. It was a lifeline, a fragile but unbroken thread connecting two souls who knew what it meant to wait, to hope, to carry on despite the weight of loss. And in the stillness of that cold morning, Sam felt something shift inside him, a resolve to keep showing up, to keep being the steady presence Eli needed, because sometimes the smallest acts could hold a world together. That night, in the dim glow of a single bulb hanging above his cramped apartment kitchen, Sam Miller found himself drawn to an act he hadn't attempted in years: baking. The old ceiling fan creaked rhythmically overhead, its hum a steady companion as he measured flour, cracked eggs, and folded in chocolate chips with a care that felt almost reverent. His hands, roughened by years of labor and etched with the weight of old memories, moved with a quiet precision, each gesture deliberate, as if he were pouring a piece of his soul into the dough. He wasn't entirely sure why he felt compelled to bake, only that it was for Eli, a boy whose heavy, guarded eyes mirrored a loneliness Sam knew too well. As the oven warmed the small space, filling it with the rich, comforting scent of melting chocolate, Sam's thoughts drifted to his own childhood, to moments when a small act of kindness could have shifted the trajectory of a day, or even a life. When the timer chimed, he carefully packed 2 cookies, still warm and soft at their centers, into a small paper bag, their edges crisp, just the way he'd loved them as a kid. The next morning, Sam prepared a lunch with the same quiet intention. He sliced turkey thin, layering it on bread he'd kneaded and baked himself, its golden crust fragrant and warm. He polished a red apple until it shone like a jewel, tucked in a bottle of water, and nestled the cookies beside it. This wasn't just food, it was a silent vow, a promise to a boy who seemed to drift through the schoolyard like a ghost, unnoticed by most. At Oakridge Elementary, Sam watched from a distance, leaning against the chain-link fence as Eli opened the bag. The boy's eyes widened just a fraction, a fleeting spark of surprise that Sam caught from across the playground. Eli didn't look around for the source, didn't call out or make a fuss. He simply sat on his usual stone bench, unwrapped the sandwich, and took a slow, thoughtful bite, as if tasting more than just the food, perhaps the care behind it. Sam turned away, his throat tight with an emotion he couldn't name. He didn't need gratitude. The warmth blooming in his chest, steady and grounding, was enough. It was the feeling of doing something right, something that mattered. In the weeks that followed, their quiet ritual took root, growing into something steady and unspoken. Each morning, Sam packed a lunch, each one more thoughtful than the last, sometimes adding a crisp pickle, sometimes a handful of grapes, but always those 2 cookies, warm and familiar. Eli began to acknowledge him in small, tentative ways. A quick wave across the schoolyard, his hand barely rising at first, as if he wasn't sure it was safe to be seen. Sam would respond with a raised hand, a gesture that hovered between a salute and a nod, his old Marine instincts blending with something softer, more human. No words passed between them, but the silence was alive with meaning. For Sam, it was a chance to be the steady presence he'd longed for as a boy, when the world felt too vast and too cold. Not grand gestures or loud advice, but the quiet reliability of someone who showed up, day after day. For Eli, it was a lifeline, a daily reminder that someone saw him, that he wasn't invisible. Over time, the boy's shoulders seemed to loosen, his steps a little less heavy, as if the weight he carried was just a fraction lighter. Their connection deepened in the smallest moments. During recess, Eli started lingering near Sam, pretending to inspect a loose bolt on the slide or a wobbly bar on the jungle gym while Sam worked nearby. Sam noticed but never pushed, letting the boy set the pace, giving him the space to feel safe. One afternoon, as Sam tightened the latch on a swinging gate, he handed Eli a screwdriver, motioning for him to hold it steady. The boy's grip was hesitant at first, his fingers small against the tool's worn handle. But when the latch clicked into place, Eli's face lit up with a quiet pride that made Sam's heart ache. It was the look of a kid who'd done something real, something that mattered. And for a moment, Sam saw himself in Eli, a boy desperate for someone to believe in him. They didn't need words to understand each other. The shared silences, the exchanged glances, the small acts of trust, they said everything. For Sam, those moments were a kind of redemption. He thought of the men who'd shaped him, the ones who'd left too soon, who hadn't stayed long enough to see him through. He wanted to be different for Eli, to offer the kind of care that asked for nothing in return, that simply was. For Eli, Sam's presence was a quiet anchor in a world that often felt unsteady, a world where he was too often overlooked. The lunches, the waves, the screwdriver in his hand, they were proof that someone cared enough to notice him, to remember him. Their bond, woven from these fragile threads, grew stronger with each passing day, unshakable in its simplicity. The world around them carried on, spelling tests, recess games, parent-teacher conferences, but their connection was something apart, something extraordinary. Neither could have known how deeply it would soon resonate, how the entire school would come to see the strength of their quiet bond. For now, it was enough to share those mornings, those small routines that held a healing power neither could fully name. It was the power of being seen, of being remembered. On an ordinary Monday morning at Oakridge Elementary, the school hummed with its usual rhythm. Classrooms buzzed with chatter, teachers scribbled last-minute notes on whiteboards, and Sam was in the cafeteria wrestling with a mop bucket that refused to roll straight, its wheels squeaking in stubborn defiance. Across the playground, Eli sat by his stone bench, the lunch Sam had packed tucked safely in his backpack. Everything felt familiar, predictable, until a black SUV pulled up in front of the school. The secretary glanced out the window, assuming it was a delivery. Then a second SUV arrived, then a third, and a fourth. Teachers paused, peering through classroom blinds. Students pressed their faces to the windows, their curiosity buzzing like static. Sam, mop in hand, stepped outside, his brow furrowing as he watched the vehicles line the fire lane, their presence both familiar and unsettling. Then they appeared, 12 U.S. Marines in full-dress blues, their boots clicking sharply against the pavement, white gloves pristine, metals glinting in the pale winter sun. At their head was Captain David Ramirez, his face calm but resolute, his posture unwavering, every step a testament to discipline. Whispers rippled through the school like wildfire. Was this an unannounced assembly? A Veterans Day event no one had been told about? The students' excitement crackled, but Sam felt a knot in his stomach, a mix of pride and unease. He'd worn that uniform once, years ago, and its weight still lingered in his bones, heavy with memories of duty and loss. The Marines didn't head to the front office or the principal's door. Instead, in perfect formation, they marched toward the side of the building, straight to where Sam stood, his mop forgotten in his hand, his heart pounding with a question he wasn't ready to answer. In the bustling heart of Oakridge Elementary's cafeteria, Sam Miller stood, a solitary figure amidst the clatter of trays and chatter of children. His hands, weathered and calloused, worked methodically, wiping down a table with an old, frayed rag. The scent of industrial cleaner clung to his faded janitor's uniform, a uniform that seemed to blend him into the background of the school's daily rhythm. But in a single, electrifying moment, that rhythm shattered. Sam froze, his breath catching in his throat as the heavy double doors swung open, revealing a formation of Marines in crisp dress blues. The entire school seemed to hold its breath with him, the usual cacophony of lunchtime falling into a stunned silence. Captain David Ramirez, a man whose presence commanded attention, led the group. His sharp, respectful nod cut through the stillness, directed not at the principal, not at some visiting dignitary, but at Sam. Unassuming quiet Sam, the janitor who moved through the school like a shadow. As if choreographed, every Marine raised a hand in a flawless salute, their movements precise, their eyes fixed on the man who stood, rag in hand, utterly bewildered. The gesture was a jolt to Sam's core, stirring something deep and long buried, a flicker of pride and pain he hadn't felt in decades. Principal Caldwell, her sensible heels clicking hurriedly against the linoleum, rushed down the hallway, her face a mask of astonishment. "Sam, what's going on?" she whispered, her voice taut with a mix of curiosity and unease. She glanced from the Marines to Sam, searching for answers in his weathered face. Sam, still grappling with the surreal weight of the moment, could only manage a slight shake of his head, his gray eyes clouded with confusion. He was as lost as she was, his mind racing to make sense of the scene unfolding before him. Captain Ramirez stepped forward, his polished boots echoing in the quiet. He removed his cap, a gesture that carried the weight of reverence, and closed the distance between himself and Sam. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice steady but laced with a deep, unspoken respect. "I'm Captain David Ramirez, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines." The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, and Sam's posture shifted instinctively, his shoulders squaring as if responding to a long-forgotten call. Old habits, forged in the crucible of his past, stirred within him, though his hands still clutched the rag like an anchor to the present. "We're here to honor you, sir," Ramirez continued, his tone softening, "for what you've done for Sergeant Michael Thompson's son." The name hit Sam like a physical blow, a sharp ache blooming in his chest. Michael Thompson, a name he hadn't heard in years, yet one that was carved into the deepest recesses of his memory. Michael had been one of his own, a young Marine in the transport division Sam had trained decades ago. Brash, determined, always the first to volunteer for the toughest assignments, Michael had embodied the protocols Sam had written, protocols that had guided him through the chaos of the battlefield. Now, standing in the cafeteria, Sam's mind flickered to those long-ago days, dusty training grounds, the roar of engines, the camaraderie of men bound by duty. Ramirez's voice softened further, pulling Sam back to the present. Before Sergeant Thompson's last deployment, he made us promise to look after his family if anything happened to him. It took us years to track them down, but when we learned someone here was watching over his son, we knew we had to come. Sam's jaw tightened, and his eyes burned with a sudden sharp sting. He had spent a lifetime learning to bury emotions like these, to keep them locked away behind a stoic facade. But now they threatened to spill over, raw and unyielding. He hadn't known the boy he'd been helping was Michael's son. Eli, the quiet, skinny kid with the too big backpack, was just another student Sam had noticed, always lingering at the edges of the lunchroom, his tray often empty. Sam had started slipping him extra food, a sandwich here, an apple there, without a second thought. It was just what he did, a small act to ensure no kid went hungry under his watch. The cafeteria remained hushed. Teachers, students, and parents who had gathered after hearing whispers of the Marine's arrival watching in awestruck silence. Ramirez extended a small, polished wooden box, its surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Sam's hands trembled slowly as he opened it, revealing a bed of deep blue velvet cradling Sergeant Thompson's unit patch, a set of service medals, and a faded photograph. In the photo, a group of young Marines stood in dusty combat gear, their smiles wide despite the weight of war pressing down on them. And there, at the center, was a younger Sam Miller, his face unlined, his eyes bright with the fire of youth, but unmistakably him. The sight was a punch to the gut, a vivid reminder of a life he'd left behind, of brothers in arms he'd never forgotten. For a moment, the two men stood in silence, the weight of shared history hanging between them. Then from the crowd, a small figure emerged. Eli Thompson, his hands clutching the straps of his backpack so tightly his knuckles whitened, stepped forward. His wide eyes, brimming with a mix of awe and understanding, darted between the photograph and the man who had quietly cared for him all these months. "You knew my dad," Eli whispered, his voice barely audible but heavy with emotion. Sam's knees creaked as he knelt down, his rough hands gentle as they rested on the boy's shoulder. "Not directly, son," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "but in the Marines we were all connected." Eli's face crumpled into a trembling smile, a mix of grief and gratitude, and Sam felt his own heart constrict. He saw Michael in the boy's eyes, the same quiet determination, the same unspoken strength. The silence broke as a slow ripple of applause began, tentative at first, then swelling into a wave that filled the schoolyard. Sam rose to his feet, his tired smile barely masking the storm of emotions within him. He hadn't wanted this, hadn't wanted the attention, the recognition, the spotlight. All he'd ever wanted was to make sure a quiet, hungry boy didn't feel forgotten. But in that moment, as the applause washed over him, Sam understood something profound. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness ripple outward, touching lives in ways you never imagine. And sometimes the Marines come back, not for medals, not for ceremonies, but to honor the quiet heroes who never stop serving, even in the humblest of ways. In the days that followed, Oakridge Elementary buzzed with a vibrancy the small town hadn't felt in years. The story of Sam Miller and Eli Thompson spread like wildfire, first through the school's hallways, then across the town's coffee shops and grocery stores, and soon to news outlets that called relentlessly, hoping to capture Sam's story. But Sam, true to his nature, remained steadfastly himself. He returned to his work, sweeping the floors, fixing leaky faucets, and keeping his quiet vigil over the school. When reporters appeared, their cameras flashing and notepads at the ready, Sam slipped away to the maintenance room or out the back door, waving off Principal Caldwell's offers to arrange a statement. "Not my style," he'd say with a small, self-deprecating smile, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had never sought the spotlight. Never was. But while Sam shunned the attention, his heart carried the warmth of that day, the memory of Eli's trembling smile, and the knowledge that, in his own quiet way, he had honored a promise he hadn't even known he'd made. As the days unfolded in the small town of Oakridge, a subtle transformation began to ripple through the community, sparked by the quiet actions of a man who preferred the shadows to the spotlight. The local school, Oakridge Elementary, became the epicenter of this change when the Parent-Teacher Association rallied together with a shared purpose. Within days, they organized a fundraiser, transforming the school gymnasium into a bustling hub of hope. Tables lined the walls, adorned with homemade casseroles, pisen, and cookies crafted by parents who poured their hearts into every dish. Local businesses contributed prizes, gift cards, handmade quilts, even a weekend getaway, each item a testament to the town's collective spirit. The goal was clear: to establish a scholarship fund in memory of Sergeant Michael Thompson, a fallen Marine, ensuring that his son, Eli, could pursue his education through college without financial burden. The response was nothing short of extraordinary. Donations flooded in, not just from Oakridge, but from neighboring towns, from weathered Marines who had served alongside Michael, and even from strangers across the country who had stumbled upon Eli's story online. Their contributions, big and small, wove a safety net of love and support. By the end of the week, the scholarship fund had soared past its modest goal, securing a bright academic future for Eli, the quiet boy who once lingered on the edge of the playground, his heart heavy with loss. Eli, a lanky 11-year-old with his father's thoughtful eyes, felt the weight of his father's absence every day. Yet, as he watched the community rally around him, a flicker of hope began to replace the ache. He'd always been reserved, more comfortable observing than speaking, but the outpouring of kindness stirred something within him, a sense that he wasn't as alone as he'd feared. His mother, Eli Thompson, carried her grief like a quiet storm. She had spent months trying to rebuild a life for herself and Eli, piecing together fragments of stability while battling the exhaustion of single parenthood. When she stepped onto the stage at the scholarship event, her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone. Her voice, soft but steady, carried the weight of her gratitude as she addressed the crowd. She spoke of Michael's pride in his community, his love for Eli, and the struggle of moving forward without him. Each word was a release, a confession of the sleepless nights and the fear that she might not be enough for her son. The crowd listened in reverent silence, some wiping tears, others nodding in shared understanding. What Anna didn't know as she stood vulnerable before them was that the community had been working tirelessly behind the scenes on another gift. Local veterans and community leaders, moved by her resilience, had pooled resources to provide housing assistance. 2 weeks later, Anna and Eli moved into a cozy 2-bedroom home just 2 blocks from the school. The house, with its sunny porch and small backyard, felt like a sanctuary, a place where Eli could ride his bike to school and Anna could finally exhale, knowing they had a fresh start. At the heart of this transformation was Sam Miller, the school's unassuming janitor, whose quiet acts of kindness had set everything in motion. Sam, a former Marine with a weathered face and a gentle demeanor, shied away from attention. He was content to sweep the floors, fix leaky faucets, and keep the school running smoothly, and all while carrying the weight of his own past. His service in the Marines had left him with memories he rarely shared, but his friendship with Michael Thompson had been a cornerstone of his life. When he learned of Michael's death, Sam's grief was private but profound, channeled into small, deliberate acts of care for Eli and Anna. He never sought recognition, yet his influence was undeniable. The people of Oakridge found themselves drawn together, reminded of the power of looking out for one another. Sam's quiet presence became a catalyst, showing them that heroism didn't always roar. It could whisper in the form of a kind word, a helping hand, or a moment of connection. Life at Oakridge Elementary eventually settled back into its familiar rhythm, but something fundamental had shifted. The school, once just a place for lessons and lunch breaks, had become a beacon of community. Sam, despite the attention he'd garnered, remained steadfastly humble. He'd nod politely when parents thanked him, quick to deflect praise with a shy smile. But Principal Caldwell saw something in him that went beyond his role as a janitor. She saw a man whose life experience, tempered by humility and resilience, could inspire the students in ways textbooks never could. After some gentle coaxing, Sam agreed to lead a basic mechanics elective for the middle schoolers. Every Thursday afternoon, a group of eager kids crowded into the old maintenance room, their eyes wide as Sam demonstrated how to change a tire, fix a dripping faucet, or tinker with the basics of an engine. His hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with precision, but it was his patience that captivated them. He'd kneel beside a student, guiding their hands on a wrench, his voice calm and encouraging. Beyond the practical skills, Sam imparted lessons he'd learned in the Marines and carried into civilian life: responsibility, perseverance, and the unspoken rule of always looking out for the person next to you. The kids hung on his every word, not just for the mechanics, but for the quiet wisdom woven into his stories. The class grew so popular that parents began requesting evening workshops, eager to learn alongside their children. Sam would just chuckle, shaking his head, but those who watched him with the students could see the spark in his eyes. Teaching had awakened something in him, a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he'd been missing. Meanwhile, Sam's impact reached far beyond Oakridge. News of his quiet heroism traveled up the ranks of the Marine Corps, catching the attention of the highest levels. In a formal letter from the commandant, Sam learned that his old transport protocols, affectionately dubbed Miller's Rules by his comrades, had been officially incorporated into the Marine Corps training manuals. Those protocols, born from necessity and instinct during his years of service, emphasized caution, care, and the unyielding commitment to leaving no one behind. Now they would shape a new generation of Marines, ensuring that Sam's values would endure. The recognition humbled him, though he tucked the letter away in a drawer, unwilling to let it inflate his sense of self. Perhaps the most poignant tribute came in the form of a garden at the edge of the school playground, where an old stone bench still stood. The community came together to create the Thompson-Miller Friendship Garden, a serene space filled with vibrant wildflowers, a small flagpole, and a bronze plaque. The plaque's inscription read, "In honor of two Marines, one past, one fallen, who showed us that quiet acts of kindness change lives." Eli and Anna often visited the garden, sometimes sitting in silence, other times joined by calm or curious students eager to hear his stories. The garden became a place of reflection, a living testament to the bonds forged through loss and love. For Eli, it was a space to feel close to his father. For Anna, a reminder that she and her son were not alone. And for Sam, it was a quiet affirmation that his life, however unassuming, had mattered. In the stillness of that garden, amidst the rustle of leaves and the hum of a small town, the legacy of two Marines lived on, carried forward by a community forever changed. In the quiet town of Oakridge, Sam Miller's life unfolded like a gentle stream, touching countless lives with its steady, unassuming flow. His story wasn't one of loud heroics or fleeting fame, but of a deeper, more enduring kind of courage, one rooted in service, humility, and an unwavering commitment to others. Sam never chased recognition, nor did he seek the spotlight. Yet, in his quiet way, he wove a legacy that would resonate through the heart of Oakridge for generations, a testament to the power of small, consistent acts of kindness. Sam's days were filled with moments that might seem ordinary to an outsider, but carried profound weight for those he touched. He was the kind of man who noticed the overlooked, those whose society often passed by without a second glance. For Sam, every person mattered, every life held value. His heart ached for the vulnerable, for the elderly widow who sat alone in her creaky porch chair, for the young boy whose eyes carried the weight of a world too heavy for his small shoulders. Sam didn't just see their struggles, he felt them, as if their pain was his own, and so he acted, not with grand gestures, but with the quiet resolve of someone who believed that caring was a sacred duty. Take, for instance, the way Sam would sit with Mrs. Eleanor, the widow who lived at the edge of town. Her days were long, filled with the silence of a house that had once been alive with laughter. Sam could sense the loneliness that clung to her like a shadow, and though he was no stranger to his own burdens, he made time to visit her. He'd bring a thermos of coffee, sit on her porch, and listen as she recounted stories of her youth, tales of dances under starlit skies and dreams that had faded with time. Sam didn't just hear her words, he absorbed them, letting her know her memories still mattered. Sometimes he'd fix a loose step on her porch or share a slice of pie he'd baked himself, his hands steady with purpose. To Eleanor, these moments were lifelines, pulling her back from the brink of invisibility. She'd smile, her eyes softening, feeling seen for the first time in years, and Sam would carry that warmth in his chest, a quiet pride that needed no applause. Then there was young Tommy, a boy whose family had unraveled under the weight of hardship. Tommy's father was gone, his mother stretched thin by long hours at a job that barely paid the bills. The boy wandered Oakridge's streets, his heart a tangle of anger and fear, unsure of where he belonged. Sam saw something in Tommy, a spark of potential buried beneath layers of hurt. He didn't approach the boy with pity, but with a quiet respect that made Tommy feel like more than his circumstances. Sam taught him how to whittle, guiding his small hands to shape wood into something beautiful. As they sat together under the shade of an old oak, Sam shared stories of his own struggles, letting Tommy know he wasn't alone. Those afternoons became Tommy's refuge, a place where he could set down the weight of his world and feel for a moment like a kid again. Sam's steady presence gave Tommy a sense of worth, a belief that he could rise above his pain. Years later, Tommy would look back on those moments, his heart swelling with gratitude for the man who had cared when no one else did. Sam Oma's life was a tapestry of such moments, each thread woven with intention and care. He didn't act for praise or reward. He acted because he believed that every soul deserved to be seen, to be held up when they faltered. His heart was a quiet fire burning with a purpose that didn't need headlines to shine. To Sam, kindness wasn't a single act but a way of being, a commitment to showing up, day after day, for those who needed him most. He understood that the smallest gestures, a shared meal, a kind word, a moment of time, could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he might never fully know. In Oakridge, Sam's legacy lingered like the scent of rain after a storm. The townsfolk didn't always speak of him in grand terms, but they felt his absence keenly when he was gone. His life had been a quiet symphony, each note resonating with love and service. For the elderly, Sam's story was a mirror, reflecting their own unsung efforts. The families they'd raised, the communities they'd built, the quiet strength they'd poured into the world without expecting anything in return. Many of them, like Sam, had spent their lives giving in small, steady ways. A grandmother teaching her grandchildren to bake, a neighbor checking in on a friend, a retiree volunteering at the community center. Sam's story honored that resilience, reminding them that their contributions, however small they seemed, had shaped the world in profound ways. For the younger generation, Sam's life was a challenge, a call to look beyond the noise of a fast-paced world that glorified viral moments and fleeting fame. Sam showed them that true heroism didn't need a camera or a crowd. It lived in the quiet moments of connection, in the choice to care for someone without expecting anything in return. His life asked them to pause, to notice the vulnerable among them, and to act with the same steady kindness that had defined his days. In a world that often felt fractured, Sam's story was a reminder that kindness could still bind people together, that compassion could still ripple through a community, creating waves of change that lasted far beyond a single lifetime. Sam Miller's legacy wasn't carved in stone or celebrated in headlines, but it lived on in the hearts he touched, in the lives he quietly transformed. His story reminded everyone in Oakridge and beyond that the greatest acts of service often happen in the shadows, without fanfare or recognition. It was a call to action, an invitation to reflect on the ways they could show up for others, to carry forward the same quiet strength that Sam had embodied. His life was proof that even the smallest acts of care could leave an indelible mark, a legacy of love that would echo through the ages.